really soon, just so you all know.
Here he is.
All right, I'm just making sure that it's actually streaming before we begin, since we've made that mistake before.
Are John and Deb coming, Michelle?
And John and Deb are not going to be here.
Thank you.
Oh.
So it says it's streaming on a custom live streaming service.
Yeah, can you see the meeting?
Hold on, I'm checking. I'm trying to check now. Let's see if I can get the link to open. There it goes. I see all of us on YouTube. I clicked the link. I clicked the link and it opened up, and I see everyone who isn't on the phone or has their video off.
All right, then. And then I will start recording this meeting. All right, and then we'll get the meeting started. All right, so we'll bring to order the Board of Education meeting of October 6th. This is a regular meeting. It is being recorded, and I ask that all participants mute themselves to prevent the meeting interference that might happen if we're all getting feedback. And in order to unmute yourself, you can use *6 on your phone or on your computer. There should be a unmute button. I also ask that everyone wait to be recognized by the chair before speaking so that people listening by phone are able to identify the person who is talking. This meeting is being held remotely, and while the agenda indicated that board members and administration would be at Reed School with public access by live stream, we have several folks under the weather or otherwise unable to attend in person. So we decided to rely exclusively on the virtual meeting, which had been planned in addition to the in-person option. So we are all remote at this point. So I'll ask you all to join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will bring up a flag so we can do that. And I'm sorry, I'm having trouble. We'll do it with that. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. And then I will just ask if Ms. Herman-Stites could share our commitment to community statement.
As citizens of our community, we will conduct ourselves in accordance with Newtown's core character attributes as displayed in our character tree. We will be responsible for our actions and show respect for each other. We will interact peacefully, productively, and politely. We will be trustworthy and honest and show compassion toward others. Newtown's continued success is contingent upon our ability to persevere, to follow through with our commitments, and to stay focused on the greater good.
Thank you. All right, and so the next item on our agenda was the celebration of excellence. Unfortunately, because we're all remote and it would have been difficult to have our celebration of excellence in the form that we usually do, we will postpone that until our next meeting. And that brings us to our consent agenda. So I will entertain a motion on that.
I move that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of September 15, 2020 and September 24, 2020, the donation to the Sandy Hook School Music Department, and the correspondence report.
Second.
So Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion. I'll just remove the minutes of September 15th, 2020.
I was just going to ask. I thought that I was not there for that, so.
You got it. So we'll do that at the end of the meeting. And once again, if I forget, please remind me, but I've got it written down. So, all right. So is there anything else that should be removed? Sensing none, all those in favor? Aye. I'm looking, Mr. D'Elia? Yes, okay, so that's unanimous. And that brings us to our public participation. So during our first public participation, the board welcomes commentary regarding items on the agenda. After being recognized, if you would please state your name and address for the record. We request that speakers be respectful and limit their comments to not more than 3 minutes. The Board of Education does not discuss personnel items or student matters in public. And then during the second public participation, commentary may address the agenda or may introduce new items for the board to consider in the future. The board does not engage in dialogue during either of the public comment periods. And if you need more information, you're welcome to email the board with your questions or even further comments. So I'll open it up to public participation. If there's anybody on the phone who would like to address the board at this time, you can use *6 on your phone to unmute yourself. And I'm not sensing anybody wanting to address the board, so we will close out public participation. And that brings us to our reports. So I'll start off with the chair report. The Board of Finance has approved the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen to transfer $400,000 to the capital and non-recurring fund. And the Legislative Council will have to take that up next. The Legislative Council has sought an opinion from the town attorney about which elected body has the authority over the education non-lapsing account. And I see they have that on their agenda for tomorrow night. And then the Board of Finance will be continuing their discussion about our CIP next week. And that concludes my report. Are there any questions from board members? Anybody? No. Okay, so we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Rodriguez?
Thank you, Dr. Kuz. So as you all know, we're back in full with our kindergarten through 6th grade. And of course, while it's only the second day, we had approximately 90% of our students who have returned. I've heard only positives from both staff and families. That first morning, I monitored traffic at 2 of our more challenging schools, Hawley and Reed. And I really feel, other than some of the traffic that's expected, I think things ran smoothly, despite, I think, a high number of parent drop-offs, especially at Reed. We did have our bus monitors. They are rotating right now because we are missing a few, but that's gone well. We have a lower ridership right now, as you would expect. But I just have to say, seeing the smiling faces of the students, was just a beautiful thing. And I know that I've gotten lots of emails from both parents and staff just to say how excited our elementary students are to be really fully back in school. I watched kids getting off the bus, really just happy to be back. And just so you know, all of the precautionary measures and the mitigation strategies that were in place during hybrid continue as part of our reentry plan. So obviously the next level, which you're going to hear about tonight, will be the bringing back our secondary students as well. And just so you know, I was on the call this morning with DPH and those members, the epidemiologists at the state level, and Newtown is at 0% cases. So this really was the perfect opportunity to begin to bring students back all in. We continue to fill positions, and our hiring process continues under the diligence of our building leaders and our central office staff. Suzanne Duramo does a phenomenal job, and as you know, provides us with a report every month that I share with you. We did have a retirement, Carol Howard, head of Meadow Grade 1, effective October 30th. We had no resignations. New hires, we had a head of Meadow reading language arts consultant, Robin Taro. She was just hired. We had a read music teacher, Teresa Peters, who was also just hired, and we still have an open position, grade 1 at Hedda Meadow. So we're doing really well. I know we're also filling a lot of our para positions. I think at Sandy Hook, she just hired 4 new paras to fill the spots. So I think we're doing, under the circumstances, an incredible job with that. I will have the first peak meeting tomorrow. We have both current and new members with the inclusion of a new subgroup to support our efforts with diversity and equity. I do plan on taking the time to reconnect with all of our members, and also the work that we were really in the midst of doing last March. And I know that lots of that work can be easily picked up this year, especially where I know they had a lot planned for the budget and communication of the budget. So I know that will continue, as will our partnerships and the communication and branding committee. They had a lot going on. Some that happened to be launched in part of the year will continue as well. And then we have a lot of new members. I know many wanted to be a part of our diversity and equity subgroup. So really tomorrow is just bringing people together, especially the new parents and new staff who are interested in joining, and I'll keep you updated. I just wanted to mention, we had the first of a series of anti-racism workshops. 16 Newtown employees, both staff and leaders, are going to be a part of that and signed up. And it is being facilitated and run through the Connecticut Center for School Change. And it was hosted by Carrie Lord and Richard Lemons, both phenomenal. Richard Lemons is well known in the industry and has done, I know, some work in many districts, and I believe Newtown as well. But it was 90 minutes each session, and I will tell you, it's really about sharing your stories and narratives, and developing your own narrative, and being able to hear the perspectives of others. And I know it's going to evolve from yesterday's meeting, but by all accounts, it was really well worth it. I have a scheduled phone call, Ann Uberti and Dr. Porcaro and I, to talk with Carrie Lord on Friday to see what more can be brought to, especially since we have Dr. Derek Gay coming to be our keynote. Well, actually, he's not coming virtually. He will be here to be the keynote speaker on our November PD, which is an all-day professional development for staff. So we'd like to frame some other opportunities and workshops following his keynote speech. So, I have the diversity and equity presentation in a few moments, and I just thought this was a nice lead into that as well. That's all I have.
That's all. So are there any questions from board members? Yeah, Mr. Crewstone.
Not a question. I just wanted to comment on, in regards to the bus monitors, I just wanted to put out there that this is actually the second round of bus monitors. The first,
Yes.
we had bus monitors on for the first, it was actually 12 days of school. And now as many as could come back did for the second round after we went all in.
Yes.
I thought it was important to put that out there because in the reentry plan, we did call out for 2 weeks of them. and the fact that we're short a few, while it's not ideal, at least the kids have gotten that 2 weeks of help with monitors, and this is just to support the fact that we have some new. Now that we're all in, the seating charts have changed a bit, and it's
Yes.
just sort of, yeah.
Well, and I think it's also important, just because it is different and there are more kids joining that have not gone through the routines. So I thought it was important, but to rotate is fine. There are less still, the buses are not by any means at full capacity. So it is still supporting, the expectations that we want and the routines that we want all students to adhere to.
Yes, Ms. Zukowski.
Which day again is the professional development with Dr. Gay?
It's election day.
11:30. Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right, we'll move on to committee reports. I know there were several committee reports. So let's see, we'll go to Mr. Cruson and then Ms. Harriman Stites after that.
I don't know. So communications committee met yesterday, and I don't know if there was an update at our last official board meeting on the 15th, because we had met prior to that meeting as well. At yesterday's meeting, we reviewed, so we're still working on the equity and diversity newsletter, which we were hoping to get to the board for approval on the second, at our second meeting this month in October. However, that the beginning of the year made meeting with staff difficult so that we could get the information we needed for our articles. So it's looking like we may have to push that off by a meeting and bring it to the board. We're hoping to bring it to the board for approval at the first meeting in November instead now. But at yesterday's meeting, we discussed the articles that have been done so far and critiquing and rewrites and that kind of stuff. And we still have a few articles outstanding, so that newsletter is coming together. At this point, I think I know I finished all of my interviews. I believe Ms. Zukowski is almost done. I think you're still waiting on answers to questions, I believe, for your closer look, right? I see her nodding.
Yeah, I've passed the questions given the nature of the closer look. I've passed the questions just for review to Dr. Rodrigue, just to make sure that I don't, that I do things professionally and appropriately. So when she gives me the go ahead, I'll send those questions right off to Andrew, and and I'm sure he'll fill that out. And so I think we're moving along. We should be able to make the first meeting in November.
And then at our prior meeting, the one on September 14th, we had discussed our next newsletter. We're hoping to make our focus on technology. We have several topics about technology in the district, both under normal circumstances and how it has looked because of the pandemic. It was originally on our agenda to discuss that yesterday, but we didn't have time. We ran out of time, so we pushed off fleshing out that newsletter until our next meeting, which will be the first Monday in November.
Great, fantastic. That's great news. Thank you. All right, Ms. Harriman Stites, do you have policy, I assume?
Yes, the policy committee met last week. We went over some more changes to the equity and diversity policy that we're looking at as a second read this evening, so we can talk about that then. We also looked at our racial harassment policy and decided that we needed to strengthen it in some areas, particularly around procedures and consequences for actions and that sort of thing. So we're going to continue looking at that at our next policy meeting. And then we just moved on with our a lot of the personnel policies, the 4000 series. So Suzanne Duramo joined us and we started going through those policies as well. And you'll start to see some of those coming forward as we move through that series.
Okay, good. Thank you. And let's see. Mr. Cruson, yes.
I have a second one because the District Security and Safety Committee met.
Oh, good. Okay.
So we met for the first time since the pandemic sort of shut everything down, it was nice to sort of get back into that. So we met virtually. We went over, Mark was there and gave us an overview of what's been going. Mark Pompano was there and gave us an overview of how things are looking since our last meeting. So over the course of the last 6 months. And then there was some discussion around some concerns, an assortment of concerns that staff had around policies and changes because of the different models and what's going on. And then we had some discussion about changes in the traffic agents and what's going on around the opening of school with traffic outside of the buildings. And that was pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments, other liaison activities? Mr. D'Elia?
The Board of Ed Advance met and we approved their budget for the upcoming year. They had a surplus in their budget from last year and they put that aside to cover any unexpected expenses. I thought that was interesting. They are they're phasing out their driver's ed program because it's not sustainable. And maybe Lori can confirm this. They're reporting on COVID, Lori. They do a regular report to you and all superintendents. Is that correct?
Yes, that's how I reported the 0% cases that comes from Ed Advance on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I confirm that. And then also, I think like many schools, they're struggling with hiring. They have a need for staff and they are not getting applicants at the level that they need. And I think that's pretty much a statewide issue. So, but that's all I have to report on Ed Advance. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? So Mr. Voros was not able to be with us this evening, and he would give the report from curriculum and instruction. I was there as well, and so I will report on curriculum and instruction. We had an update from Dr. Rodriguez regarding the commitment to honoring diversity and inclusion in curriculum and including the PEAK group, as well as student voices in that work. The district is piloting 2 new math resources in K through 5. One is Bridges and the other one is Envision Math 2020. And the goal is to have a recommendation by the early spring. And I want to note that many thanks go to our teachers who are piloting these resources at this time, because you can imagine they're doing a lot of other new things at this time. So to be piloting resources at the same time that they're working through all these technology and different ways of teaching is pretty impressive. There are 3 new online resources that are being used in the district: IXL, Lexia K through 8, and RAS Plus. I don't know if any of you with kids might have noticed those new resources being used. And then the other item that we talked about was, over the summer, Mrs. Uberti and Mr. Percaro assembled teacher advisory groups to help better understand the challenges of the synchronous learning that we're now doing. And they have been and will continue to do walkthroughs in the buildings. And then finally, well, not finally, one more item was the middle school schedule will be redesigned, and there's been a group assembled with the goal of getting a rough draft for that for the 21-22 school year. And hopefully that'll be done in time for any budget considerations that might need to be looked at. And then finally, the commitment of our technology. I just wanted to note that out of that meeting, we talked a lot about the details of what's going on in the district. And it just became very evident that the commitment of our technology department, Anne and Frank, and all of our administrators and teaching staff, and all of their commitment to making this hybrid model work is just extraordinary. In terms of the day-to-day operations. And I wanted to note that because it really was good to hear about all of that and how much commitment there is to making sure that our students are learning throughout all of this COVID crisis. So that concludes that report. And were there any others that we need to board reports? All right, so we'll move on to our student reports. So, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. D'Elia, yes.
I have a question, and I'm sorry I forgot to ask it earlier, maybe for Lori, or I see Dr. Longabuco's here. How did the SATs go, and when do you think we'll see scores? I'm just curious, because it's pretty quick, I think, turnaround, I think.
Yep, the SATs went great. We tested 12 students in each room. All of our seniors came in. We will be doing a similar model next Wednesday for the PSATs. And as far as score turnaround, they've told us 14 to 17 days. So we're almost there.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so we'll move to our student reports now. So Mr. Jerfy and Ms. Clore, do you have a report for the board this evening?
Sure, yeah. Hey everyone. So I'll just start by talking about music classes because I think one of you mentioned it last time. So I talked to someone in cohort D who's in the band class, and he says they're going fine. Those people just play along at home. They just mute themselves. So there's not much adjustment that needs to be made. And I'd assume this is the same for all music classes. Next, I'd like to talk about clubs. Clubs are pretty much back to normal. I sat in on a club meeting for FBLA, and everything seemed to be going pretty smoothly. Half the people are at home and half were at school, depending on which cohort they were in. But overall, it was a normal meeting. But for larger clubs, I feel like more work needs to be done, like National Honor Society. So I went to one of their meetings, and since there's a lot of members, it was hard to get everyone's online meeting working, and the meeting didn't exactly go as expected. I know that the board of that club are working on finding a solution to that problem. And I don't know of any clubs as large as National Honor Society, but they probably have some issues with stuff like this as well. In terms of introducing students to new clubs, there's also going to be a virtual club fair this year. A slideshow presentation's been made with info from every club in the high school, and it's going to be emailed to students through Naviance.
Okay, and then, so hello everyone. So I'll continue. We have officially kicked off all fall sports games. So most sports are having their senior nights like as quickly as possible, just so that we want to be prepared in case something happens at the end of season and we can't like finish it out. So boys soccer had their senior night last Thursday. Field hockey and girls volleyball was on Saturday. Girls soccer, girls swim and dive, and boys and girls cross country have their senior nights tonight, or they're going on right now, I guess. Girls volleyball and field hockey have started off strong, winning their first 3 contests 3-0. And football even had their first 7v7 game last Friday away at Pomp Rock High School, and they won 33-0. And then there's another game, I believe it's against Bethel this Friday at home. This season, Unified Sports is being split up into soccer and kickball rather than just soccer to kind of split up the athletes. And their first practice of the season was actually yesterday at 3 o'clock after school. So it's very good to see that is up and running. And then last Monday, the CIAC announced that each athlete would be allowed to have 2 family members come and watch their home games. So each athlete gets 2 lanyards with their name on it to give to like whoever comes. And then as long as the family member comes to the gate after signing up on Family ID with a valid form of identification and their lanyard, they will be admitted. And then unfortunately, no fans are allowed at away games, and they're strongly encouraging people to not stand on the fences and to rather join the live streams. But like, for example, the swim meets are all virtual. So I know the girls' senior night is tonight against Pomperog. And what they're doing is just Newtown is swimming in our pool and Pomperog is swimming in their pool. So in order for anyone to watch, you can stream at the our NFHS homepage, so National Federation of High School homepage, and subscribe to the channel, I guess, which is $11 a month, and you can watch any games that Newtown plays. And usually the NHS Athletics Twitter page posts the link, so you can just like go there, click on it, and watch any games. So if you want to see football this Friday or the soccer game tonight, you can go there and join. Another thing is seniors are like continuously working on their college applications as the deadlines are fast approaching. So like you guys just mentioned, we were fortunately able to take the SAT on September 23rd. And I think the College Board said something about scores being released around October 9th. So that's pretty soon. And I know most of the seniors are waiting for these results to submit their applications and be final with it, which will be a big relief. All of the school counselors have made informational videos on applying to college and like forms to fill out that are all posted on the Google Classroom page for the grade because Counselor Workshop cannot meet in person with the hybrid schedule. So if anyone wants to look at the videos, it's all them talking over, or you can set up a time to meet with the counselor because they have made themselves very available during this time. So their schedules are usually sent out to all the students in the email. And then the seniors finished submitting baby pictures, senior quotes, senior portraits, and senior superlatives for the yearbook last week. Very exciting. Another item, October 5th through October 9th is Solidarity Week. So the high school's Gay Straight Alliance is hosting a few virtual events this week. And they also sent out a Google form to all of the students' emails. That's a pledge form, and you can sign it to show your commitment to allyship and solidarity. And then lastly, the Newtown High School Band and Guard had their first performance of the 2020-21 season on September 26th at Blue and Gold Stadium. So the performance was recorded and sent to the U.S. Bands Organization as part of the varsity competition season. And for now, they're just continuing to practice in sections and are preparing for future performances this season. I know last night they had a rehearsal at the stadium under the lights at, I think it was at like 6:30. So they're continuing to practice. And then during the week, they're in separate sections to stay COVID separated for the virus for now. And that is all.
Very good, thank you. Are there any board member questions or comments? I just have one question for you, Mr. Jerfy. You talked about the National Honor Society meeting. Was that a virtual meeting that you attended? Okay.
Yeah, and it was like too big to do in a Google Meet, so we had to use Twitch as a platform, and it was too laggy to do anything.
I think they just ended up sending out a like form to fill out to check for attendance because it wasn't working too well, but I'm sure they'll fix out the kinks of Twitch.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Are there any other board member questions or comments? All right, sensing none. We would love to have you stay and contribute to the conversations that we have during the board meeting. So please do. If you're unable to, have a good evening. Thank you for your reports.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right. And that brings us to our presentation from Dr. Rodrigue on diversity and equity. And I have the presentation and I'll pull it up on my screen, Dr. Rodrigue, if you want to.
Okay. Sure.
Let me see if I can
That's it. So thank you, Dr. Koo. I wanted to start by saying we've really worked hard to begin to frame a strong and practical framework for supporting diversity and equity in Newtown Public Schools. And this naturally aligns with the values and beliefs that were previously outlined in our own strategic plan. So there definitely is a connection there and something that was important to us. When you as a board approved a resolution, you did so with some important commitments highlighted that would build on some of our existing practices and new programming that would expand community understanding, language, practice, and supports that I think will ensure a safer and more equitable system for staff and students and of course our families. There are some relationships here, some symbiotic relationships that support this new framework for diversity and equity through a focus on culture and practice and leadership. What does the culture say about our beliefs and what changes need to be made to expand that sense of belonging and trust and respect that all members of the school system ought to have? What practices, that's something that we want to look at. What practices exist currently, whether they're academic or social emotional, that actually facilitate inclusiveness, trust, and safety. And finally, how do we as leaders, and that's both administrators and teacher leaders, work to listen, gather input, utilize data, and create opportunities for members to have a deeper understanding of diversity and equity, to adhere to the behavioral expectations of acceptance and certainly respect, and to hold each other accountable for behaviors that might conflict with those expectations. And again, bringing it back to our values and what's important to us in district. Thank you. Within this particular framework, we're in the process of shaping and refining. We will include reviewing current practices, as I just mentioned, that demonstrate a safe, inclusive, and respectful environment. For example, managing and holding members of the community accountable for bullying, harassment, and incidents of racism. You know, do we teach our students how to be advocates, not only for themselves, but for each other? Our second step program actually supports an anti-bullying theme and teaches students how to be upstanders, these are individuals who stand up for, you know, once they witness incidents of harassment and bullying. But this needs to be consistent across K-12. So we have a variety of programs that I'll mention. This is just one that's more of a K-6 program, but it is something that's important. And bullying is just one unit that is done through second step. There are many other themes that naturally lead to teaching students how to respect one another. Developing future practices in alignment with our values and beliefs. And that's outlined in the resolution that you all approved as a board. What new strategies and practices might we include to further support diversity and equity? That's something that we're pondering now. So we want to make deliberate changes to protocols so that all students and members of the community are held, as I mentioned, equally accountable for their actions. In many cases, families and students during the community conversations that I hosted did not necessarily feel they had experienced satisfactory resolutions when various issues arose in schools. And again, these are past events, but they are important ones, and they make a difference when we're talking to families about their perceptions of school. And again, this framework is Newtown, but it really is a framework that that I think is important for educators, no matter where you are. We want to continue to assess and modify and support our practices so that we promote visibly equity, inclusivity, and respect. And while we might look at future practices to impact positive change, this needs to include definitely ongoing assessments and modifications of some of the programs that we do have and practices when they're not working or when we somehow miss the mark. And I think that happens all the time. I don't care what organization you work in or for, you need to make changes. And that's something that it's an evolution and it's something that we can't miss. I also think we need to have the input of stakeholder voices. This was something that I think became very clear in our conversations with community members, parents, staff, and students, so that we continue to make inroads in eliminating their perceptions of fear and discomfort, distrust, or even worse, a lack of physical or emotional safety when students come to school. We need a system that provides a voice for students and families about our curriculum, our programming, and our practices. And I know, Dr. Koo, you mentioned earlier when I spoke to the CNI, these are conversations that are just beginning as we look at, reviewing curriculum. And again, this process that we already have in place, and I think that's important to note, we have structures. We just need to utilize those venues and those structures to make change. The development of a Board of Ed resolution that I mentioned was really important and significant, and a long time. I don't know if you can get to the next slide.
Ugh, it's stuck.
Oh, you're kidding.
There we go.
There you go. So the development of that resolution, as I said, was really important, and it does represent the commitments that we anticipate will help us move forward, and the actions that we want to take in a variety of areas that will deliver desired changes in diversity and equity. The resolution focuses on building cultural awareness and programming, requiring mechanisms, as you could see, for reporting and documenting incidents of bullying, harassment, and racism, continuing to support best practices in our social and emotional programming, and resources to ensure that every student feels safe in a supported environment. And what we've already started, and I mentioned one workshop just a while ago, to provide training for staff and setting, of course, policies as well that become really the guidelines for staff and leaders. We are presenting as you know, our diversity and equity policy this evening. And we did gather some input from multiple stakeholder groups in developing that. That will help to set clear expectations and help us with future practices. So our goal is really to make students feel a sense of belonging and safety, accepting and, feeling respected as students. Ohio State University, which I thought was important, addressed the notion of inclusivity. That's their term, and I actually like that, but I wanted to explain what it actually meant. It really talks about a system needing to focus on several key principles. And those principles include fairness and respect, values and belonging, and confidence and inspiration. And all of our students and staff need to feel valued. That's, again, not just here in Newtown, but that's what makes a positive learning environment. They need to stay and remain socially connected and feeling confident and motivated. And I know that through the pandemic, these principles were certainly challenged, some of them. But I think as we all come back to school, this is really something that we need to take a really hard, serious look at. And as leaders, we need to make sure the barriers that have existed need to be eliminated. So our social emotional program, and I know we've presented on that in our model through CASTLE, is critical here, and working with students through activities that define clear expectations, building their empathy, their tolerance, their advocacy, as I mentioned, and conflict resolution consistently from kindergarten through senior year. This is really a critical component of our entire framework. And again, I'm showing this as a framework. We have many pieces that we're working on in a variety of ways, some that already exist, some that are naturally being strengthened, and others that we're looking at in the future. We also need to honor existing practices. And I think that's sometimes districts get caught up in throwing everything they're doing out without really looking at some of the structures that exist that are good and are working. And so I really wanted to utilize, as I am with Peak and in just really developing a subgroup off of that to build a framework, a resolution, new policies, community conversations, to solicit input, our SEL program. We have an anonymous app for students to share their concerns. And I know that students use that at the secondary level, as well as programs like NICE, student exchanges. You know, students have gone to India and Spain and France. And it really is something that we want to continue and build upon, just to understand multicultural perspectives. And I think that's really important. These are the building blocks that already exist for us, but we know we need to do more. So our vision is really to expand practices to include proposing, as I did, the inclusion of a diversity and equity coordinator or compliance officer to work to support students, staff, and families in finding resolutions to issues. You know, that came up a lot, and it was really hard to hear families who walked away not feeling satisfied. Some of those, you know, incidents might have been small. Some of those were much larger, but either way, they walked away feeling less than, you know, satisfied with the resolution. And that's really hard to hear, and I know we can do better. And again, these are, you know, we need to listen to those issues that arise all the time. So this particular position person would work very closely with staff and leaders and families and students to make sure that those kinds of things don't happen. Conducting a review of curriculum K-12 through the revision process, and looking to ensure we do have multicultural perspectives and voices, as well as eliminating bias and what's called institutional racism in our programs. And I know I've had conversations with our assistant superintendent and our director of teaching and learning, and we know we're going to move forward and make some inroads in that area. Enlisting the input of students. When I was on with students in one of the community conversations, that was a huge conversation, and something that, to be honest with you, we probably should have done a long time ago. You know, listening to students is very, very important when it comes to education. And I think that it's really timely right now to be able to do that, to look at literature and texts that address various cultures, voices, and biases. Examining our practices in reporting acts of bullying and harassment, as well as, again, holding all members accountable for their actions. That's students, that's staff, that's leaders. When we witness things, many of the stories that came forward really resonated with me as an educator, that perhaps things had gone on and maybe, you know, had been overlooked or people walked by, afraid to step in. And so when we teach students about being upstanders, that's at a very young age, it really empowers students to be able to stand up to that kind of bullying. Making sure our academic programs that are in place really do build a stronger awareness of diversity and equity. And again, supporting workshops for staff as well as students. As I mentioned, not just upstanders, but also conflict resolution, managing emotions. And these are things that we do now, but I think we need to do them with a greater consistency, I should say, K-12. As an aside, we, as I mentioned, had 16 participants in that anti-racism workshop. I think it went really well. And Dr. Derek Gay is coming in November, and we hope to have a really wonderful workshop for our staff on Election Day, which will focus primarily on diversity and equity. So we are really making headway. And I did want to talk about our recruiting efforts. That's another piece that isn't outlined here. But I am working with Suzanne DeRamo to look at one of the issues that did come up was in recruiting persons of color and minorities as employees in our district. And just so you know, what I read to you tonight, we did start looking at other venues for attracting staff members to Newtown. And so we are working on that. But I think in a lot of ways, there are natural ways of recruiting. And that is when they start to see districts who are really taking this kind of diversity and equity and making it a focus and making it important. It's a natural attraction and they feel more comfortable. 18% of the employees I just talked about that were newly hired identified as a non-white and persons of color. So I think that's really important for you to know. And I hope that that continues to be a positive for this district. So that is all I have. There is one more slide. It's a really great quote from Gandhi, and I just wanted to end with that quote because I think that everyone is really excited, I think, to do this work and to be involved in it. But I want you to know that there are really great things happening. There are students who really care not about each other and support each other, leaders who and staff who care about students greatly and how families feel and work really hard to build those wonderful relationships we have in Newtown. And I'm very proud of what we do. I just think like any other district, we really always need to evolve and change and grow and make it the best possible learning setting, learning environment for our students. And so I'm excited to start this work.
Thank you, Dr. Rodrigue. That's all good information to have. And I'm wondering if there are any board member comments. Ms. Harriman-Stites?
Of course. So I just wanted to thank you for the presentation. And I know, we passed the resolution. I don't know, I guess it was a couple of months ago now at this point. And I know there have been a lot of folks asking, okay, so what? So you pass a resolution and what happens next? And so I'm glad that this has been moving forward and we have a plan in place and there is a firm commitment to carry out what we set forth in the resolution. And I know, the policy coming forward tonight is one step in that. And the racial harassment policy that we're working on is another, obviously the staff training. But I think this sets a really good standard and a really good framework because like you mentioned, I think there were many families that had frustration in the fact that there wasn't a resolution that was satisfactory or that lended to them having trust in the district. And I know we have a long way to go to rebuild that trust. And hopefully folks will recognize that we're trying to do that in a really earnest way that is inclusive. So I appreciate your efforts and I'm excited to work with you on it.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else who wants to weigh in? I'll just say that that we used to, there was a while ago when we were picking out pieces of our meetings that fulfilled parts of our strategic plan. And we sort of walked away from that a while ago, but our strategic plan actually does include this in it. And I didn't pick out the piece to quote exactly, but I do think that it is worth revisiting our strategic plan at some point. I know it goes through 2021, and this is a horrible time to revisit a strategic plan right now because there's so much else going on right now. But I appreciate all that's going on and how much it does address issues that, you know, the board is very much interested in making sure that we're addressing, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing towards that.
Thank you.
Are there any other board member comments? Nope. All right. You've left us speechless. Thank you so much. That's a great start, and I do look forward to how much we progress during the year and hearing updates as we go along. And I also appreciate you mentioned that the new staff hires and what kind of percent minority hiring we're doing. And I don't think we've ever had that reported as part of what the information that we're getting. So I'm glad to see that on what the information that we're receiving, and I think it's important that we continue to monitor that and make sure that we're moving in the right direction. So thank you. All right, so I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody because I don't have everybody on one screen here, but if I miss you raising your hand, please shout out at me. So I think that'll bring us to our old business and the COVID-19 update. This is just something that we've put on our agenda so that we can receive updates on anything that has to do with COVID-19 and changes that are being made due to. Was there anything that you wanted to add to this, Dr. Rodriguez?
Well, I was going to talk about that advanced reporting, but we really sort of did that before with when Mr. D'Elia was speaking. I do get reports weekly from Ed Advance, which is you know what led me to talk about the 0%. And again, one of the things that we're also doing that you asked for is tracking expenditures for COVID, and Tanya's doing a really great job of that, and continuing to record you know, all of that information so we know what we've expended already, and future expenditures as well. And there may be some, and again, with the uptick in technology, that's a part of this. So we will have a detailed report for you most likely at the next meeting, and as well as some of the funding that's coming our way. So you will have an accurate reporting on that. Also, I wanted to talk about, and Jillian mentioned the fall sports kicking off. We've worked really closely with Donna Colbert, our Director of Health, along with Matt Memley, and I believe Matt is on the phone, is going to give you a really quick update. But we follow the protocols in alignment with the CDC, including the safety health measures in place during all of our practices and athletic events. Football, as I sent you information, is engaging in a 7-on-7 style competition. And we, as Jillian mentioned, we are allowing spectators, but only 2 parents for each athlete, and no outside spectators. So these are only at home games. You are not allowed to come in if you're from another school, just either stand, sit on the hill, or what have you. So we're being very you know, strict about that because we want to keep people safe. We're doing very well with COVID, and we want to keep it that way. And I think all of the districts feel similarly. Matt is on hand. Matt, are you online? Because I know you might want to say a few words.
Yeah, could you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, excellent. Yeah, well, we had 4 events going on right now, kind of as we speak. So I just kind of ran into the office. So Yeah, just a quick rundown of what we're doing, and Lori described it, and Jillian actually did a fantastic job just giving the rundown of what we're doing with athletics. So right now, all of our fall sports are operating on a low to moderate risk in terms of the CDC and the Department of Health guidelines. So we have our high risk sports, which
Uh-oh.
Matt?
I'm
Matt?
coming back. Hold on, I'm coming back. Could you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know. I'm in the office, so I don't get the best service down here, but I just want to make sure because my computer's spinning. Hold on one sec.
We hear you now. You faded out for a minute, but just
All
a
right, so
couple
I'm back
seconds.
now. Okay, excellent. Yeah, so all of our fall sports are operating right now in low to moderate risk. So we have cross country, girls and boys soccer, field hockey, and volleyball, which are all competing interscholastically with other schools in the Southwest Conference. And right now, which is pretty amazing, including our unified team that just started yesterday, we have 487 student athletes right now in fall sports,
Wow.
which is, I mean, it's
Great.
have so. Fantastic stuff. We have a lot of different modifications for COVID, for fan and spectator attendance, which has been going very smooth. So thank you to all of our parents out there who've been following these guidelines, and all of our kids. I mean, just seeing these kids back competing has been so awesome for me and for our coaches. So yeah, I mean, I could go on for a long time about everything that's happening, but it's very exciting, and to seeing the kids compete has been so great.
All right. Very good. Thank you. All right. We do have board member question, Mr. D'Elia.
Hey, Matt, how you doing?
Hey, Dan, good. How are you?
Good. I got a question for you about pay to play. Are you getting any pushback on pay to play? Because I understand that I'm just wondering if you're getting any pushback on that, and if you could just give me your feedback on that.
Yeah, no. To be honest with you, we really have not had any pushback, any real feedback either way. But we felt that the price that we were putting out there for pay to participate is fair based on the season that we're having. The kids, I mean, are still having 70 to 80% of their games played just as they would any other season. So right now, I think it's pretty fair, and I have not received, to be honest with you, any complaints or any praise on that either. So it's been kind of just neutral.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Just to clarify, Mr. Munnelly, when you say it's fair, are we doing the full pay to play? No, it's a reduced.
Yeah, reduced rate. We prorated it. Well, usually it's $160 per sport per season, and this year we moved it down to 120, which we felt was kind of right in line in terms of the percentage of games and everything that the kids are getting. So we felt that it was fair.
Great, thank you.
Just a follow up from my point of view, I was just wondering if they were getting a lot of pushback, then that would be something that we could discuss in the future. I just wanted to make sure that Dr. Rodriguez or Mr. Memmerly weren't receiving a lot of pushback as far as pay to play goes.
Not at all.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Anybody else have a question or comment? I don't see any. I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
For that update.
Thank you, Matt. And I'll just end at least this agenda item by saying all of the parents, students, staff have really followed through with all of those measures that we put into place. It's just been, I think that's what's really kept everyone safe and why we have low numbers in the community. So I just hope we continue in that way.
Definitely agree. I agree with that.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, Mr. D'Elia.
Dr. Rodriguez, so we're starting back full time. I can imagine that you've gotten a little bit of feedback from the elementary schools, and I'm hoping that it's very positive. I'm sure the kids, right? Aren't we full time right now?
Yes, we're full time. We're all in K6. This was day 2 of all in. But as I mentioned in my superintendent's report, it's all smiles, and I've heard nothing but positives from the staff and from the building leaders that it just has really gone well. And they want students, they want them in their classrooms. That's where they belong. And when we can do it safely, then there's nothing better.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So let's move on then to our next item on the agenda, and that is our action on superintendent goals. And we should probably put a motion.
I move that the Board of Education approve the superintendent's goals for 2020 through 2021.
Second.
So Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion. I don't know, Dr. Rodriguez, did you get any questions or comments between
No.
meetings? Does anybody
No.
have anything they want to, Ms. Zukowski?
I apologize about not being more forthcoming. A simple question, and then I'd like to revisit a question I asked in our last meeting when we discussed this. Can you explain to me the difference between points 1 and 2 of the second item and points 5 and 7?
Oh boy.
Item?
So I will admit I don't have the goals in front of me because I actually forgot that was even on the agenda, Dr. Koo. I can pull it up quickly, but I will have to move out of my screen probably.
Is it,
unless you can pull it up.
Them if you'd like.
I can pull it up and I can share it if that helps any. Let's see.
They're both on the first page.
Do you see what you're?
Yeah, so item 5 of point 1 says update the BOE regularly on COVID-19 cases, trends, and decisions regarding the status of the school closure. And then item 1 of the next says continue to keep the BOE community and staff updated on decisions related to COVID pandemic, including cases, trends, and appropriate school modes of learning. It seems that those two are about updating with the current status for academic, and so is one really just about addressing the challenge?
So one, let me get back to it. It's hard to see. So one is really just focused on the board and keeping you, that really had to do with keeping the board updated, basically on cases and trends. The other talks about giving the community as well and the staff, keeping them updated on the decisions related to COVID pandemic, including not just cases and trends, but the appropriate school modes, which we're going to move in and out of, or we're expecting to move in and out of from hybrid, for example, to all in. So I can probably clarify that second one a little better so it's more focused on that. There was a distinction there for sure, because that one really had to do with the learning environment as well.
Okay. Okay, and then the other, so the last point on the first goal is in concert with Assistant Superintendent to Director of Teaching and Learning, develop ongoing professional development opportunities for the staff to support distance learning and use of technology. And point 2 of the following goal is work closely with superintendent to ensure staff and administrators are provided professional development opportunities to implement remote learning for students.
So the first area is supporting administrators and staff in the community, and that had to do with working around the emotional challenges of COVID. The other was more about vision, and I took this directly from the goals. So this was more about an overall vision and looking at the environment. So, while they're related, one is really more about a vision and the other is more about actually supporting, staff and staff in that area and working with, I see where they're very close and similar, but they were in different places for a reason. So I can, again, I can either get rid of one or rework that so it's not so closely related.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something. Now I have one more question, but I can yield the floor so that others can ask questions if they would like.
I don't know. Does anybody else have questions? I can't see everybody because I have the screen.
I do. It's Rebecca.
Yeah, Rebecca.
I just have a quick question, and it's just like a strange little thing. But the last one about equity and diversity, I don't understand the quotes around deliverables. Is that still there?
Yeah, because because we're using that as a term, and it's been used by community members, staff. That's why I put quotes around it, because it's not really a term that we use. But I want to start to connect that with outcomes, because you hear deliverables a lot and people think it's this new term, and it really isn't. It's really outcomes that we're talking about.
So I mean, I think maybe we can consider changing it then to outcomes. I just feel like when you put something in quotes like that, it doesn't seem as strong, I guess. I don't know. That's just my take.
Yeah, I can take the quotes out. That's not a big deal.
Or change it to outcomes. I think either way.
Or change it to outcomes. Okay.
Yeah, outcome seems more appropriate to me. All right. Is there any?
I'll clarify the second bullet in the second area, the clear vision, so that it's less of a redundancy. Okay.
All right. Any other? Yes, Ms. Dukowski.
So picking up on what I had mentioned last time about asking whether or not it would make sense to have a goal about the special ed issues related with the special ed, sustainability of the program and cost. So, as you know, I had done a study of a 10-year study where I had changed everything to $2020. And what I see is that, 2010 budget was around 78.4 million. 2020 budget was around 79.3 million, which is less than $1 million difference. But special ed increased by over $4 million in that case, in those 10 years. And that's real dollars, that's 2020 dollars. So it basically increased by 50%, over 50%. Again, during my very first year as on the board, we encountered issues with special ed. We noticed that we needed to extend the SAIL program to the middle school. We noticed that we had a couple of additional outplacements that had occurred, which means that amount is still being driven up. And, knowing that our entire budget only increased by 1 million, but special ed in that time had increased by 4 million, it says that we should maybe look a little more closely and focus a little bit more attention on trying to really understand how to manage that better. And I know your programs and your approach is to make our programs so that we can keep kids within our school district. And I think that's wonderful. It would be nice in my mind to actually have that be as a specific goal.
I can certainly add that in, but I do want to point out that a lot of that, and I don't remember if we responded when you asked the question, but maybe it was a different, at a different meeting, but a lot of those costs were really out of our control and
Right.
based on student IEPs, incoming students, transportation, outplacement. And this was this is the issue that has plagued districts for the last, I don't know, 5 years or more, the rising costs of special education. So we are, as you know, and I'll put that in as a goal because I think it's a good one. And without the goal, we're already doing that by extending SAIL to the middle school and looking at other opportunities in-house. That's certainly our goal, if we can, to bring students back from outplacements. But again, a lot of that is certainly indicative of the individualized educational plan of every student.
If I can just respond to that, and then I'll have had my say. Yeah, I see so much effort that you're doing in this particular area that it makes perfect sense to have that be a goal to
Sure.
basically show that we recognize the effort and we value it.
Absolutely, I'll add that. Thank you.
All right, any other? I'm gonna stop sharing.
Yes. I have a question.
Yes, Mr. D'Elia?
I don't understand that goal. I just don't understand it. If it's out of Dr. Rodriguez's control, we're going to create a goal that's basically dependent upon population. And I guess maybe we can articulate it a little better, but I don't understand that goal if it's something that's really not in her control as to how many special ed students are enrolled in our school at any given time. How can she have a goal that says, I'm going to do something, but I don't know how many kids are going to be enrolled in my school, but I'm going to do it anyways? And I guess that's my question regarding that particular goal. And I'm not saying it's not a good goal or a bad goal. I'm just saying I'm confused as to how we can make that a goal that we measure that we measure Dr. Rodriguez's performance on when it's out of her control.
Well, can I ask a question? Thank you, Mr. D'Elia, because you made me think of something. Is this about rising costs, or is it about really genuinely wanting to bring students back to be educated here? Because I think they're very different.
It would really be forging better relationships between our special ed program administrators and the families to try and keep the students here, because everybody works better within, so putting that in, and that's exactly what you did with the SAIL program and moving it down to the middle school. That effort was to be able to reach our students and keep them here rather than having all of that turmoil that the families have to go through when they feel like their students aren't getting the education they need locally, and therefore they end up outplacing them.
Well, there are, I think, other reasons for outplacement. That's not actually the reason. We also have DCF placements. I mean, there are so many things that are out of our control. I want to be very careful now that I think of it, how we put that goal or how I phrase the goal. I think the continuing efforts of what we've already done, like the SAIL program and programs like that, maybe working alongside the director of special education to look at programming internally, something along those lines, rather than trying to, because bringing students back there has to be a really good, sound, viable reason to do so that has an educational value to it, in the best interest of the students. So I want to make sure that we're very clear on that. I will be glad to write a goal and pass it forward to all of you to look at. But I just want to make sure it's not about lowering costs, because that's very difficult to do as I just pointed out, when it comes to special education in particular.
Right, because again, what happened is I lived through the knots. And the knots, we had a really good program. And what happened is because costs got so out of control, they killed the program. And to have that happen again, I think would be just very, very disappointing. So if we could think of ways of making things sustainable. You had looked earlier into working regionally. So that might be one of the, I don't know that we can make it happen, but just that, you keep abreast with what's going on from a regional point of view. So you have all these wonderful efforts that you did last year that showed you were really focused in this area and focused on providing good, a good environment for our special ed students. Now, obviously there will be some that, we just can't reach. I understand that. But we had 2 students that transferred out of district in the, just, halfway through the year. So I'm not quite sure what happened, but at the beginning of the year, we thought we could meet their needs. But then, 4 or 5 months in, it became clear we couldn't meet their needs. Yeah, so there's a lot going on, and just to have some, some sense of oversight on that and understanding would I think would be good.
Can I just ask, there's been a lot of Ms. Zukowski's thoughts on this, and I would like to hear from and Mr. D'Elia raised the question about whether this was appropriate for a goal. And I guess I too am wondering if this is an appropriate goal. I just would like to hear from other board members as well, whether this is something that you would like to see included or not. And I see Mr. D'Elia, you have your hand up. Yes.
I don't mind. I think Mrs. Zukowski brings up a good point about making a goal to support programs for students with special needs. And I think that fits well under that goal of our clear vision for sound, emotionally safe, equitable learning for all students. I just want to make sure that it's not a financial goal, because I think that I worry that we lose our vision. I think the board, we as a board, are charged with the fiscal responsibility of setting a budget. And I don't know that I think there's a disconnect there that I'm not comfortable with. And I don't want to set a goal of saving money, especially when it's in regards to our students with special needs.
So essentially we want to make sure that we're providing appropriate education for our special education students.
Yeah, I think Mrs. Zukowski's, I understand what she's getting at. I just didn't understand the beginning about the costs.
Okay.
But I do think that we can come up with something that helps. And so I'm comfortable with something along those lines. I do think it's going to take work, though, to figure it out. I don't think it's something we can do right now.
So Dr. Rodriguez, is this something that we need to do, that we need to approve this evening? I can't recall.
We don't have to approve it this evening. I mean, if I have to write another goal, then you can't approve it this evening. So
I'm curious, may I speak?
Yes, Mr. D'Elia.
I'm curious what Mr. Cruson thinks.
I mean, I agree with the point about not the trouble around making it a financial goal. I do want to see that we're committed to supporting the programming, though, and I do think it's important in our continued efforts around special education to continue to support and even improve where we can our offerings and that kind of thing. So I do think that's an important goal. But I share your concerns around making it a financial goal. So I want to make sure we're supporting one and not committing to the other.
Okay, just to make sure we're giving everybody a chance to speak here, Ms. Herman-Stites, do you have anything you'd like to add? All right, so Ms. Zukowski, I'll give you one more.
I'm just agreeing. I don't think it should be a financial goal. I think it should be a programmatic goal, about the program and about trying to make sure that I will say we need to make sure the program is, we do what we can to try and make the programs as sustainable as we can make them. And that will bring in a bit of the financial aspect, no question. But the point is to make sure that we have the options where those students that can stay here want to stay. I know they want to stay here, and they have everything that they need to be able to stay here. That the programs are strong enough to, to meet their needs, provided we are in a position to be able to meet those needs.
Okay. So
I can actually write a goal around the we have 7 programs in district, special education programs. So it really has to involve the special education department, and looking at and continuing to put effort forward to strengthen and sustain those programs.
That's good.
But again, I just want to clarify that when students leave or families leave, it is not simply because something we lacked or failed to do. Sometimes it really is truly about for other reasons that deal with their needs. So I'll just
okay,
leave it at
Mr. Delia?
So I'd like to make a suggestion that we still approve these goals, because I have a feeling it's going to take more than a couple of weeks for us to refine this goal. And then I think that we should possibly consider amending them. But I would like to give Dr. Rodriguez the opportunity to start working on these goals so that, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I worry that if we keep kicking the can down the road, that these goals it'll be January, and then we'll be saying to ourselves, the year's half over. So I would recommend that we approve these goals, and then when Dr. Rodriguez gets us these additional goals, that we amend the goals.
I think that's a great idea. So let's do that.
I'm going to call the question then, please.
All right. So I don't recall Robert's rules, how you do the call the question thing, but we'll just stop discussion at this point. And I think
Sounded official.
Had enough. We've had enough discussion. All right. So with the idea that the goals can be amended later, and Dr. Rodriguez can bring us her suggestions later, we'll do that. So all those in favor of the goals as presented? Aye. Any opposed? None. All right. So the goals are approved, and we can amend them later. And this is just a process piece. We've had 2 meetings in which to discuss these things, and that's, again, if you come up with questions between meetings, or if you have something you'd like to change in a policy, in goals, in whatever, it always helps if you come to the meeting with prepared language that you'd like to propose to add or subtract, so that we can actually have a discussion on a solid something to talk about. So I think, we're ending up in a good place here, but just a reminder of what helps meetings go along. All right, so that'll move us. What will that move us to? That moves us to our new business. Discussion and possible action on the November 2nd return to school schedule for the Newtown Middle School and the Newtown High Schools. And we can entertain a motion on that.
I move that the Board of Education approve the November 2nd return to school schedule for the Newtown Middle School and Newtown High School.
Second.
All right, Mr. Delia makes the motion, Mr. Kusan seconds. And I think Dr. Rodriguez, you have.
Well, I was just going to say, as you know, we were really clear about prior to the new school even beginning, how we would safely bring students back. And I set a goal for our secondary students to come back on November 2nd. So as you know, middle and high school is far more complex schedule-wise than elementary, both in the ability to social distance in increased populations in classrooms and in the hallways. And of course, lunch. Lunch is an issue, most notably at the high school. That being said, I've worked with Dr. Longabuco and Mr. Einhorn, and both of them have worked diligently to prepare a plan for a safe return to school for all of their students. As you know, one of the largest and more complex issues that high schools face is really the number of students. And I think Dr. Longabuco has done a good job, especially about how we can really avoid, the lack of social distancing during lunch periods, and that will also occur at the middle school. And both have similar schedules. Just so you know, they try to really work together on this because students do ride the buses together. And this will include some early dismissal time to make this schedule work with grab and go lunches and having to rotate without having to rotate students through lunches, which I think is very, very important to the structure of the schedule. But I will let Dr. Longabuco and Mr. Einhorn share the schedules with you and their plan to bring students back safely.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. I know everybody has a copy of the schedule, and so I will start with the high school. And as Dr. Rodriguez mentioned, Tom and I worked together to come up with very similar schedules for our middle schoolers and our high schoolers so that we can both adhere to the same bus routes, which is an important factor in this giant puzzle. Another piece of it is, before we even go there, I just want to note that our students are doing an excellent job. We do not have issues with students refusing to wear masks. They're doing everything that they're supposed to do. And we are regularly praising them for that because we are very cognizant of the fact that that's why this is working. And that's one of the reasons why I really believe that with the removal of lunch, we can truthfully make this work. It's not going to be an issue in classrooms. We did have some rooms that need to be reassigned because of volume. But we can provide adequate space in the classrooms, and we can make this schedule work. The reality of the situation is we only have so many indoor cafeteria spots for our students that are safely 6 feet from each other. And that poses a significant challenge when there's 1,500 mouths to feed and shuffle through, very few cafeteria spaces and a couple tents. Which are wonderful and have been working great, but it will get chilly eventually, and that will become a problem as well. So actually, our current 8-drop-2 schedule lended perfectly to this because of its rotation. You will see on the schedule that was provided to you that we would run 5 classes in the building every day for all students, and then provide a travel and lunch block where students would leave Newtown High School, go home. Oh, thank you, Dr. Koo. They would travel home, and then they would need to log on to their last class by 1:42. And because we have a rotating schedule, that would give them, of their 6 meetings per rotation, 5 would be in person and 1 would be remote. And every class would meet remotely 1 time over the course of an 8-day rotation. So what this does is it brings it back to a little bit more normalcy in our school. Our students are used to this schedule. They're used to the 8-drop-2 and 8-day rotation. They will just take that last period online. And I will tell you, I presented this to my faculty at the faculty meeting this afternoon. And there was a lot of positive feedback from this option. A lot of our teachers have been doing CAF duty. And that was a major concern that has come up all along, even through the hybrid. It does reduce the periods. We usually run a 57 or 58-minute period, so it will shrink it down to 50 minutes. However, it's still a very appropriate length of time to get an adequate amount of education and work done during that period, and still have the opportunity for our teachers to gain back some prep time during that travel period. So they will get their contractual teacher lunch during that travel block, as well as some prep time for both their remote period at the end of the day and any work forthcoming in the next day. I know that sheet's a little confusing. This is sort of our master schedule sheet where the top block is 90% of the days, the regular schedule. And then we have a few advisory schedules on Wednesdays where they meet. and then 2-hour delay, 3-hour delay, 2-hour dismissal, and 3-hour dismissal. And you can see the timeframes that we've laid out for all of those. And you can see which ones include travel and a remote period and the ones that don't. Obviously, early dismissal days, when we're letting students go early, we are not then requiring them to log on once they get home. We will get through all of the classes in the day because lunch is not served at the secondary level on any early dismissal day. So that's kind of the basic gist of it. And our plan is to start with an A day on Monday, November 2nd, and then roll all the way through. As you can see from the calendar above, we mapped out through the end of January, mostly because we need to work in small chunks at this point. And it gets us through midterm exams and the end of January in this schedule with very little changes, a couple advisory schedules, and 3 or 4 3-hour early dismissals that were already built into the calendar.
So maybe I should begin. Hi, this is Tom, talking about the middle school. We so appreciate the board supporting the beginning of the year through the hybrid model. We've been able to use that time to really put our protocols into place. We have different places for the buses to drop off kids from one wing to the other. So we've really minimized the time that kids spend walking in the hallways with each other and really tried to perfect that. So the same challenges that the high school is facing, so it does the middle school, especially with lunch. We've actually converted one of our gyms into a cafeteria, not only using that, but we have some classroom space that we've converted to cafeterias as well. And that's working excellently with our hybrid model. But as we bring more and more students back into the building, it'll be a challenge to keep them separated, as Dr. Longabuco said, 6 feet apart, and then trying to make that so that they could take their masks off to eat. So with that is certainly a challenge. So the middle school has also put together a very similar schedule that allows us to have kids, in the building for the 6 periods of the day, and then they would do that last period remotely, very similar to what the high school is proposing. So that this way we will also do what's proposed is having a rotating last period of the day, because we didn't want that same period to be always that remote period, because this way we can rotate that through. So given that we also like to have some predictability in our schedule for our middle schoolers, is that day 1 will start with period 1, day 2 will start with period 2, day 3 with period 3, and so on, so that you can kind of see the patterns that go through. Then again, at about 12:28, 12:32, students would be dismissed to travel home. They'll have a chance to have lunch, and then they would log in remotely at 1:42 to finish up their last period of the day. And then they would be able to, again, repeat that same cycle the following day. We too put together the 2-hour early dismissal, 3-hour early dismissal schedules, along with any delayed openings. We just wanted to make sure we weren't missing anything. And we too presented this to our staff this afternoon, and a lot of positive comments as well. Again, I think Dr. Longabuco said it best. Those people that really do lunch will say that, yeah, it's working now, but it would really be difficult at best, if at all possible, to add additional students to those groupings. We've met with our cafeteria folks to kind of really think about how we would do that grab and go lunch that Dr. Rodrigue described. And we've really worked out a couple of ways of trying to make that efficient and effective, and how to dismiss kids. And then again, not having, everybody in the cafeteria trying to grab a lunch at the same time as well. So that this way we have an orderly way of moving kids out of the building, as we do right now with multiple places for parents to pick up kids, obviously take the bus, and then if anybody's walking. So I think all in all, the schedule allows us to continue doing the great work that we have in place, and then be flexible enough to have all the other schedules in place in case of any inclement weather or, for example, any parent conferences or anything like that that should come up. This way, we've put that together already so that this way our staff has had a chance to look at it and gave us, like Dr. Longobuco said, a lot of positive feedback on it.
All right. So I will stop sharing and are there any questions from board members? Yes, Ms. Harriman Stites.
Thank you for putting this together. I'm sure it wasn't easy. I have a couple questions, but the first is around those students who participate in after-school activities, sports, clubs, that sort of thing. So is the idea that the student would take the bus home, take their last class remotely, and then have to find a way back to school for practice?
So that would be the idea. And just as a reminder, which obviously you know, students have been finding their way back on 3 of the 5 days for practice as it is, because they've been fully remote on 3 of the 5 weekdays that we have been using. And also, our fall sports are set to end in the first week of November. So this will start the first week of November. We'll be wrapping up fall sports, and then there'll be a break before winter sports begin. But the thought would be that they would need to go home. We are not planning on keeping any students in the building, with the exception of some special education students, which I should have noted before, that will remain for the whole day. And those are students that remote learning is just not a functional option for those students.
That was actually my next question. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
At the
Okay.
middle school, we continue to do a lot of our clubs and activities with a remote portion of it because we always wanted to include our cohort D students. So we're planning on continuing to do that as well.
Okay.
Can I just add something quick that I also should have added? We started this by calling transportation and finding out when the very last student gets off the bus, to assure that they will be home, have time to eat something quickly, and log on to their last period. So really that was the first conversation that occurred. And then we built around the length of time that Alan told us that we needed for our students to be able to make it.
Okay. Ms. Zukowski?
2 very quick questions. So you said that you've reduced the size of the time for classes from 57 minutes to 50 minutes, which means you're losing about 49 minutes a day. Are we still going to be within the 900 hours of required instructional time? That's the first very quick question.
Yes, we are. We did some very rough calculations, and we will meet it without a problem. We have been for the last 8 weeks running 85-minute periods, and I just did some very quick math, and I planned a semester instead of planning the whole year, just to see where we would be by January, and we will be within the 900-hour limit, even with the 50-minute periods, if we had to do this proposed schedule for the duration of the year.
Okay. And very quick second, how will you be counting snow days if they should happen?
That's a good question, and I think that that's above where we are. I think we're still waiting on guidance on how snow days will work, and how we may or may not be able to complete snow days remotely.
So I can just let you know, Mrs. Zukowski, that the state is still not, as of last week, that they are not waiving snow days, even though students have been using remote learning all this time. At this point, they're not going to count snow days if the students are home working and can work remotely. I don't know if that's going to change at some point. I think the push from districts and superintendents is loud and clear. But according to Fran Rabinowitz, who gave us an update just last week, right now the state is not moving on that yet. It does require a change in legislation, so that's a whole nother piece to it.
All right. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Cruson.
Question, I do have a comment as well, but my question is, has this been looked at? You said you passed it by staff. Has it been passed by any students?
I can tell you at the high school, I have spoken to a handful of students about it just in passing. And I'll be very frank with you, the students just want to come back every day, and they don't as much care about the logistics of the schedule. I think they would be happy to take one online class instead of 4 every day, at least in our particular circumstance. And they are, both teachers and students alike are looking forward to having the bulk of their education in person if we can safely provide that.
Okay. I kind of wish our student reps were still on and around to comment on it. I'm on board with students need to be in person as much as possible. I have been since the beginning. My concern is this seems confusing to me, and I'm trying not to underestimate our students, because I know that we talk about our students being, well, all students being able to adapt and handle it. But this seems overly complicated, and I appreciate a lot of work went into this, but it seems overly complicated. I'm looking at that travel and I'm concerned about losing students, because there's that long break in the middle, then they have to get home and get virtual. I'm not sure, knowing what I know about transportation, the fact it takes about 45 minutes roughly to get home. Looking at the timing on the high school schedule, that only leaves them about 20 minutes to get lunch and get back on. I'm concerned about both their ability to do that and the stress that would induce. And I'm having a lot of trouble being comfortable with this plan. I feel like if we're not at a place where we can get them all safely back into school all the time, shoehorning a plan like this in is not what's best for students. It might be best to stay hybrid. But that's my comment and my thought process here. It's much like what I said a few meetings back about the elementary plan and not being thrilled with the half days and Wednesday. I'm not comfortable that it's necessarily what is best for the students. I think it causes new problems instead of that may not be counteracted by the problems or by what it gives to the students. And I will end there.
Thank you. I can certainly understand that. I do think that this is the schedule that in the exact same order that our students are used to. So as far as, yes, they will have to travel and yes, they will have to join remotely, but this is the schedule that 75% of our building has been operating under for the entire duration that they've been in high school, except for the last 7 weeks where they acclimated to a new schedule that we proposed. So I do feel confident that they can do it. They also have large gaps in their schedule now, because if they have a study hall or a free period, they may participate in period 1 and then have 85 minutes off and then have to join again for period 3. So many of our students are already doing that, and it's happening just by nature of what their schedule looks like.
All right, are there any other comments or questions, Mr. Delia?
I missed this, but was the community involved in any of this planning? Was it ever sent out, or I'm just curious if any parents were any feedback from parents was sought on this at all?
I did not have parents look at it from my end. I will tell you that this is our normal schedule, just with a tweak. So I can understand and value the travel part and the last period remote, but this is truthfully our traditional high school schedule that has been passed and adopted and used for years at this point.
And Mr. Einhorn, I guess to you, I was just wondering, from the parent point of view, as far as drop-offs, and traffic, because you don't have drivers and you're so do you foresee any issues with that?
So one of the things that we did to start the school year off is that we have parents dropping off students in the horseshoe if their student is part of the A wing, so the kids can go directly into that part of the building. And then if the student is in the C wing, the parents take a different route all the way down to the cafeteria. So we've kind of tried to spread it out to use our campus as much as we can relative to traffic coming in and out. Clearly in the morning, the drop off goes pretty quickly because the kids are just getting out of a car. In the afternoon, it takes a few moments longer, but the kids have really figured it out. And thank goodness for, the parents being cooperative and getting there a little bit ahead of time. So kids are walking out of the building and getting right into cars. So we've kind of let the folks that are getting picked up do that a few moments earlier, so that this way, again, we're staggering how we dismiss kids, because that's the last thing we want is just large groups of kids in the hallways at the same time. So I think that, that protocol going forward will still work here, and we're confident that it will. But it really boils down to the space inside the building to be able to adequately give them lunch. Again, the way they have to sit facing the same direction, 6 feet apart, it's amazing how much space you need for the kids we currently have. So that really is the biggest driver here. Certainly we'd love to have the kids there all day, but with that being said, we really tried to be as creative as we could in figuring out how we can get in the kids for the big bulk of the day and still have that opportunity to get that last period in. And since we're rotating that period at the end of the day, no one period is going to be overly burdened with this kind of schedule. And I think to Dr. Longobugo's point, they're doing that 3 days already, and some of our distance learners are doing it 5. So I think that just having that opportunity to be in the building with their peers for the big bulk of the day, I think is going to continue to be a great driver for us to get them back.
I would just like to add to Tom's point. Currently, our students are in the building 2 full days, which is about 13 hours worth of time. And this proposal would have them in the building 22 and a half to 23 hours over the course of a week. So it is a significant amount of increase. And I know we're saying, if we can't do it, then, maybe we should consider staying in hybrid. But I do think the instructional value of in-person contact time with their teacher is significant, and just about, almost doubled in this proposal, even with the travel and the remote period at the end.
Ms. Claire, I see your hand up.
Yes, I was listening while I was doing homework, and I just wanted to add that I know a lot of people that I've talked to at the high school are really looking forward to going back full time and miss having everyone in your class. And I don't think the going home will be too much of an issue. But I know I'm a senior, so I do get to drive, but I am looking forward to going back full time.
Great. Thank you for adding that comment. That's helpful to have your input on that.
Sure.
I'll just say that, as part of the reentry planning committee, initially before school even started, I know that one of the biggest concerns of mine and some of the others on the health and wellness committee was the cafeteria and how in the world we were going to make that a safe environment for kids. I mean, that to us was the biggest challenge, or at least in my mind it was. So I completely understand why we're at this point talking about this, and I appreciate all of the time and effort that went into figuring out how to handle this. I think the other thing that we need to think about is that when we talked about this at the beginning of the school year, we did say to the community that beginning in October, the K through 6 kids would be going back all in, and that if that worked out well, we would continue with the rest of the 7 through 12 students, so that they too would have the chance to be all in. So I think that I don't want to start talking about could we just go back to hybrid because I do think we made a commitment to that at that point. And I think that would be, not that we shouldn't consider changing what's happening based on health indicators, but I do think that, we need to stick with what we said we would do initially. Yeah, Dr. Rodriguez, did you?
Yeah, no, I wanted to also make a point that we have to continue to look at all of this as temporary. How long that temporary actually is, we don't know that. But if you talk, I know if you talk to students, I know Jillian was just one of many, they want to come back. And in my, during my superintendent calls, I get at least the districts that are in this proximity or in the Southwest area, we talk about this particular issue. This has been on our agenda for the last couple of months. And every school district is approaching, they're all having the same issues with secondary return to school. Some, it's a combination of, staying on hybrid and tweaking the schedule a little bit, getting kids in, 3 days a week rather than 2 days a week, early dismissals, delayed openings, whatever they can do to get around the complexities of whether it's lunch or too many students in a building, or in some cases, there are classrooms that just simply aren't big enough in many districts. So I think both Dr. Longabuco and Tom did a really phenomenal job of coming to a good space where we can bring kids back safely. And I don't agree that we should keep students on hybrid. I just do not agree with that. We did make a commitment, and I really want to honor that, but we have to do it in a safe way.
Dr. Rodriguez, you mentioned that this can all change depending on what happens with the health indicators. So what would happen if we went to all distance learning? Would the class schedule go back? Would it continue with this, or would we go to, or has that not even?
No, that's a really good question. And I can't answer for Mr. Einhorn. And I know I asked that same question of Dr. Longabuco, and I believe you were going to be going back to the other schedule if you went back to distance learning, which is the 4x4 block, correct?
Right. So what we talked about is if we had a brief closure, which would be a couple days for whatever reason, like we've seen some districts do, we would adhere to this schedule and still continue to use our letter days. And if we were in a place where Dr. Rodriguez decided that we did need to go full distance for a decent duration of time, 2 weeks or beyond, we would run a schedule based on the 4x4 block that we're doing now. And that's for ease for teachers, for students, for not having as many classes to log into on the same day, and just for the practicality of full distance. And that was the model that was put forward in the original reopening plan over the summer.
Yes.
Yeah, and the middle school would just revert back to the schedule we have presently, because we're seeing all the classes now, so that would be what we would adopt.
But that's only on a long-term closure, correct, Mr. Einhorn?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Cruson.
Sorry, I came up with another question. And this is probably one for Dr. Rodriguez. Has anyone talked to All-Star about this plan and whether there will be, I know we talked about whether it was doable, but as far as additional costs that might happen?
Yes, we did. They were one of the first people that we contacted with regard to this, just to make sure we had the buses and everything would work out. I know there were a few questions around the special education use of the vans and the preschool, which has, obviously there are shifts in the preschool and buses are used at the time that we would be releasing. But we worked that out, especially because there are some of the higher needs students who would remain in school and work online as they're doing now, where they're going more days in the hybrid. And there would really be no additional cost because the busing works out.
Okay, the reason
We
I
don't
asked,
need more buses or more drivers for this.
the reason I asked was because looking at this, the drivers will be called in 2 hours earlier than normal to run the high school, middle school runs. And then if they're running the elementary runs at normal time, they've got downtime. I don't know what it, they've got downtime that they would not normally have, that they're either, I don't know if they're going to park the buses somewhere and have to kill time or what the plan is on All-Stars end. But it seems a bit unfair to the drivers to say, hey, you've now got 2 dead hours that you're not getting paid for that you can't do anything with. That's why I asked if there had been any.
Yeah, there were discussions and that none of that was ever brought forward at all.
Okay.
All right. Do we need further discussion? All right. So I think we should take a vote on this. The motion is to accept, let's see, what is the motion? To approve the November 2nd return to school schedule from the Newtown Middle and High School. So all those in favor of the schedules as presented? Any opposed? All right, so that's 4 in favor with Mr. Cruson opposing. So the motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Einhorn and Dr. Longabuco, for staying with us to share those schedules with us and the work that went into making those. And thank you, Ms. Clore, for coming back to share your thoughts on the schedule. All right, that'll bring us to, what will it bring us to? Discussion and possible action on the Newtown Association of Administrators contract. So I'll entertain a motion on that.
I move that the Board of Education approve the ratified Newtown Association of School Administrators contract.
Second.
All right, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion. Does anybody want to speak to this before we vote? It sounds like it was a productive discussion, and I'm always glad to hear about negotiations being productive because I know they can be difficult, but they often open up a good conversation about things that need to be addressed. So thank you to everybody who spent the time on that negotiation. All right, anybody else? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None, so that passes unanimously. That's good. And that'll bring us to action on authorization of signature. And this is, I'll entertain a motion on this.
I move that the Board of Education authorize Tanya Vadas to execute agreements, apply for grants, or to sign other documents as necessary in the normal course of the school system's business, including documents that support the adopted budget or that implement the board's established policies or programs.
Second.
All right, Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion, and this is following up on the motion that passed that we made several weeks ago, I don't know, a month and a half ago. And it's just due to Ms. Vadas becoming permanent with us now. So, yes, Mr. D'Elia?
I just have a question about the other motion. We authorized Mr. Benkowski. I know that he's resigned. Do we need to do anything regarding his authorization, or does that authorization go away with his resignation?
Yes.
It does. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Did we get everybody? I feel like I'm missing somebody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, yes. So that passes unanimously. And that brings us to our second read on the policy 0523, equity and diversity.
Madam Chair, I had made a promise to call for a nature break, let people stretch their legs for a few minutes. It's been 2 hours since this meeting has opened. Would that be acceptable?
I will allow a 5-minute break if you'd like to take a break, and then we'll resume at 10 after 9. How's that?
Thank you. Oh, boy. I'm going to be civilized. I drink out of a cup instead of a bottle.
I'm here.
Oh, good. Okay. I think that's everybody we need. Okay. So let's resume with our discussion and possible action on the policy. And I don't think we had a motion yet. All right.
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 0523, equity and diversity.
Second.
Okay, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion, and I will turn it over to Ms. Herman Stites so she can let us know what the policy committee came up with.
Sure. As you know, this is a second read on the policy. In between the first read and this evening, we've had feedback from board members, from the public, from staff. We've also done some research. You'll see the changes to the policy between last read and this read are in purple, I believe, although of course I printed it not in color, so I can't tell myself.
Yes,
but really,
purple.
Okay, really it was around some language changes. There were some pronoun changes that we made. We added the definition for upstander. I think it's important to note that this policy really is just kind of codifying what we put forward in the resolution. There will be language that complements this in the racial harassment policy. And as Dr. Rodrigue mentioned in her previous presentation earlier today, we'll be looking at all our policies with an equity lens. And so this sort of just is an overarching policy statement around the issue.
Okay. Are there any? Yes, Mr. Cruson.
I just wanted to add that one of, in regards to adding the upstander definition, we did have, I know that there was a concern raised about using upstander versus another ally or another word. And I just wanted to put out there that the committee did have a discussion about which term we wanted to use in the policy and decided on upstander after that discussion. So that was, while it's not necessarily clear from this that discussion happened, I wanted to put out there that we did have a thoughtful discussion about what term to use.
Right, and that the upstander language is language that is consistent with our current curriculum, and it's language consistent with what we are, our expectations of both our staff and our students.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Zukowski?
Yeah, just picking up on the upstander, because I'm used to the phrase for like sexual harassment. There was a special training for being an upstander for when you saw a person being sexually harassed. And it may mean something different here. So my question is, when it talks about teaching the upstander, now where was that? So familiarize students and staff with clear expectations for being an upstander to maintain a civil, safe, and respectful school community. I've switched words around, but they're all there. An upstander is someone who speaks or acts in support of an individual, particularly someone who intervenes on behalf of a person being attacked or bullied. Is this instruction or expectations, is that going to apply broadly to all of our student body and all of our staff, or to all except people of color in our staff and student body?
Are you asking if people of color will be expected to be upstanders as well?
Yeah, because typically upstander was used as a way for others of it from another group. That was my understanding, to come to the support of someone being harassed.
That is not correct.
Broadly applied to all students and all staff.
We expect all students and all staff to be upstanders.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Ms. Zukowski?
Just one more question, so when you say recruit, employ, support, and retain a teacher, administrator, instructional, and support workforce that is balanced and reflects the diversity of the student body, I'm going to be very literal here. What does that mean? So if we have a student body that is currently, 3.4% Native American / Black or 2 or more races, and we have 8% who are Hispanic or Latino, and we have 3.2% who are Asian, would we say, well, what we want as a workforce, and I'm going to focus on teachers, that is balanced and reflects the diversity? Would that mean, given we have 307 teachers, that if we got 11 teachers who were either Native American or Black, 10 teachers who were Asian, 25 teachers who were Hispanic and Latino, matching the ratios, that we would be satisfied with that?
I think that would be a wonderful place to start, Ms. Zukowski. I'm not really sure what exactly you're looking for an answer there. Did you have some sort of a different language suggestion? Or I think the language is clear, and I think what we're striving for and what we have been in both the resolution and this policy is for a more diverse workforce and looking at ways to increase diversity in our workforce. Now, if you're asking, should we say that the percentages must match the percentage of the students exactly? I don't really think that's fair on either extent. I would like to have a more diverse workforce. I think that's what Dr. Rodrigue would like, and the administrative team, and I believe that's what the resolution of the board set forth. So I'm not really sure the nature of your question or what changes you would like to see made so that it's more clear. But I think anyone that would read that would understand what it meant pretty clearly.
So my context is I was a technical woman engineer in 1980. If we have those numbers, it means we have 1.5 Black / Native American per school. We have 1.5 Asian per school. Now, one of the issues with the diversity is as much retaining talent as it is getting talent. And I can tell you that as a woman who was one of 5% in a technical workforce back in 1983, that having no one to talk with, was very, very difficult, because it was all, you never felt like you were a part of the group. You'd go, they'd be talking sports, they'd sit down, they'd look at you, they'd sort of laugh, they'd turn to curtains, you'd say, I have no idea about curtains, but it was a very awkward experience. What I'm trying to say is, what last meeting, when we brought this up, I had said, is this really all we want to shoot for? Can we set the bar higher? Can we try and set it so that, like I had offered the language in my comments to say, strive to recruit, employ, support, and retain teachers, administrators, and an instructional and support workforce that reflect the diversity of the students in the state of Connecticut. Doesn't mean we'll reach it, but at least we're going for something so that people can actually have more support amongst themselves.
We had a discussion about your point in the policy committee meeting, and we decided that we were comfortable with the language as presented.
All right. Is there any other questions or comments?
Nope.
Proposed amendments? All right. Sensing no further discussion, all those in favor? Oh, Mr. D'Elia?
Sorry. Miss Harriman Stites, where it says, it's right above what you were just talking about, where it says create multiple pathways. That, the blue there, I just was wondering, I mean, marginalized, I guess I was just curious about marginalized, because anybody can be marginalized, and you know what I mean?
We use that language throughout, if you'll see. It's accepted language to mean all of the populations identified in the diversity definition.
Okay.
It's pretty standard language.
Okay, so I'm just saying, can someone say, oh, I feel marginalized, and then all of a sudden that, you know, I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it. I probably am because I'm tired. So
Yeah, I mean, I just think, I mean, if a student is feeling marginalized or that they're not getting an equitable education, then they right, they
Okay.
probably are, you know. So I mean, you know, we want to make sure that we are addressing the needs of all students, and I think that's really the basis of this policy.
So I guess if I'm understanding you correctly, that's a way to make sure that we're including it. We're all inclusive.
We're trying to be as inclusive as possible in the
Thank
policy.
you.
Because I'm sure there are populations that we may have,
Yeah,
you know, missed, and new populations and new subgroups and that sort of thing. And so we want to just make sure we're being as inclusive as possible using some broad language.
thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Cruson, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to comment on that because I actually pushed on that. And that was, so we were discussing changes in our policy meeting, and I felt that we were getting a little too tight lensed on certain groups. And I wanted to make sure that we widened it out to make sure we weren't leaving anyone out. And that's where the marginalized and disenfranchised came from. That was Dr. Rodriguez's suggestion to help alleviate my concerns. So the goal was to try and open it up, because we don't want to create new problems while trying to solve other problems, and accidentally leaving some group out, or leaving someone feeling like they're not getting what they should be getting from the school system, from their education.
And it actually did what you just talked about, Mr. D'Elia, which is widen that lens. You know, that marginalization has a very broad meaning. You could even look at gender. There were times in both college and public school where, and even now, where females felt very differently approaching, you know, those pathways in science and engineering. So marginalized can be gender, it can be race, ethnicity, lots of lenses there.
Okay. Anything else? All right, sensing no further discussion, all those in favor of the policy as presented? Aye. Any opposed? Ms. Zukowski, so the
I'd like
motion,
to give a statement as to why.
all right, so the motion passes with 4 in favor and Ms. Zukowski opposed, and Ms. Zukowski would like to explain her vote.
And if possible, have this statement reflected in the minutes. I shared my concerns about some aspects of this policy in our last meeting on August 8th. I'm not going to repeat those concerns. I will simply say that I think we could do better. This is a very important area for me, and I'm just a little saddened at the limitation of the scope that we have in certain areas. Thank you.
All right. I can see we're opening up a whole new discussion now, because everybody wants to comment on.
Those of us who vote no are allowed to give a statement as to why we voted no. It does not open up a discussion.
All right.
Thank you for making that clear. Thank you very much for making that clear, Mrs. Zukowski.
let's move on to discussion and possible action on the 2021-22 Board of Ed budget assumptions and priorities. I'm gonna suggest that we not make a motion on this evening, that this just be for discussion. And essentially what you have in your packet is what the budget assumptions and priorities were from last year. We do not have to use those. We can modify them. We could come up with a whole new set. But I do want to, I thought it would be a good starting point for discussion. So I have a few thoughts on it, but I would be happy to hear other people's thoughts. Yes, Mr. Cruzan?
Well, a quick one right off. I'm looking at point number 4. Safety, security, and health standards will be supported through continued training of staff. But we don't put equity. It doesn't list equity and diversity. I think we should be calling that out within that list. I agree that the others are also important, but I think that's the list we've used every year. So I think equity and diversity is a point where we definitely have room to be offering training and such.
So I also flagged that one, and I thought we could simply say that we would support, or that let's see what the assumption is: safety, security, and health standards will be supported. And whether it's through training or other means, I think, and we can list what those things are. But I also think to your point, Mr. Cruz, on the equity and diversity maybe deserves its own bullet point. I think that
I saw you going there, and I would agree. I think we could make a separate bullet point. I just can't off the top of my head think of what the wording for said bullet point would be, but I would agree with that as an alternate to my suggestion.
Yes, Ms. Harriman states.
No, I agree with that. Because I think it should be separate. I don't think it falls under safety and security necessarily. So I think having it be its own standalone makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah. Yes, Ms. Zukowski?
So is this because we're speaking in terms of the budget. So is this because we foresee that there will be monies called out in the budget that would actually be needed for ensuring that we support equity and diversity?
Yes.
Yeah, this is the assumptions page. So these are really the things that we are assuming. And then the next page really talks more about specifically the priorities for funding, I think. I think the assumptions are a little more broad, but yeah, there is a financial implication to it, yes. All right. So, do you feel that we need that full statement under number 4? Is that necessary, or can we? Yes.
I think that we could shorten it and therefore make it more broad even by doing so. But sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, Ms. Harriman states, did you have
No, I'm actually just wondering if that equity and diversity piece goes under the priorities instead of the assumptions, just based on the other items that are in the priorities.
Yeah.
It maybe makes more sense there.
Yeah. Mr. Cruzan?
I think it might depend on how we're phrasing it and what we're trying to accomplish with it as to which list it ends up on, because the priorities seem to be specific. So if we're talking funding for equity and diversity professional development, I think that would probably go under priorities. But if we're making a broader statement about supporting equity and diversity, I don't know, changes or revisions or improvement maybe throughout the district, that might go under as an assumption, because it's a broader scope.
Yeah. All right, we can work on that between now and next meeting. But I think getting a general idea of what everybody thinks are priorities is a good thing. How about in the list of priorities, do you have any?
Mr. D'Elia had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to look at the page and the, okay, yes, Mr. D'Elia. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering if we could consider adding an assumption around the calendar. Even though we approved the calendar, I think that the calendar should be part of our, I think that setting an effective and timely calendar might be something. I don't know what everybody thinks of that, but just something I wanted to throw out there that I've been thinking about for a while.
You're referring to the budget calendar, not the school calendar, right?
The budget calendar, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just think it is something that we should visit every year. And I know we visited early, but at the same time, I think that it's an important part of the process. But maybe it doesn't fit this because this is all financial and whatnot, but I just thought it might be. I just wanted to hear what everybody's thoughts were on that. That's all.
I don't know. Anybody have thoughts off the top of your head on that? Yes, Mr. Cruza?
Since no one else wants to jump in with thoughts, the only reason I sort of hesitate on that is because we already set the calendar. It almost seems backwards. Like if we had set the assumptions first and then the calendar, it makes sense to me. But because we did it the other way around, it doesn't. And that's just my thought. So I don't see how making it an assumption really affects anything for the 21-22 budget season.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Yeah. Next year, we'll do it in the reverse order. So a couple of thoughts I had on number 2. I don't know if we want to talk about a level funding plan for technology. I think, we need to assess what our technology needs are and make appropriate funding, because I know it's not just a matter of, I guess this originated with the idea that we don't want to have funding that goes up and down every year, that we eliminate technology one year because we're short on money, and that's the easy thing to eliminate along with maintenance projects. I don't know, that was just. But I would like to continue a funding plan for expansion and sustainability of technology. Yeah, Ms. Zukowski?
Yeah, the word level it's a funny word, but it's a plan that has expectations. I mean, at this point, what we're doing is replacing technology, and we're providing freshmen with their own Chromebook. And so essentially we have a predetermined technology deployment plan that will have a known type of funding that just may change from year to year. So it's not going to be level one year to the next, but it is essentially a plan that is funding a level set of, expected technology. So if you're saying just get the word level out there, maybe we could put a consistent, or, to basically say that this is a year after year plan that, is expected. It's not that we're ramping up. It's a well-known set of machines we have to buy.
Okay. Ms. Harriman Stites, did you have your hand up and I?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we always had level in there because that was a commitment we had made to the other boards that we would come forward with a plan that was consistent year over year, dollar wise. I think we're in a much different situation now. But, you know, just, you know, wanted to give respect to the fact that that was, you know, a kind of a longstanding commitment that we would try to put forward a technology plan that was similar year over year.
All right. Yes, Mr. Cruson.
I was going to try and keep my mouth shut on this one because I keep speaking, but oh well. So something that I've mentioned multiple budget years now is the fact that the number really doesn't change year over year. And it always comes out that it's a level funding plan because it's staying the same. And I worry about the sustainability of that every year. I ask the question every year and say, is that really going to be enough money, or should we be increasing it? Because I mean, the cost of machines changes, the cost of maintenance, labor, all of that changes. So the idea that we're always going to commit to this $550,000 number that we put forward every year for in perpetuity isn't reasonable. So I do agree that the way that sentence is structured has left me wondering whether that is the reason why we put that same number out every year. And so I do want to make sure that we are funding things. I can understand wanting to be consistent in a way and have a consistent plan, but I don't want to see us locking ourselves into the same dollar figure year after year.
Yeah. Dr. Rodriguez, did you have something?
Yes, I think I brought this up last budget season. It actually, I thought the history of that term being used was because technology would get hit year after year after year. That's when cuts were made, it was the first easy place to go to. And I understood that that was the purpose. However, it really, I've noticed just in the past few years, it actually had an adverse impact as we developed the budget. First of all, because the perception was that you kind of maintained that level funding, right? So if it was 500,000 or whatever it was, that even if it wasn't needed, that you didn't want to dip below and you know, or you didn't necessarily want to go so far above. So that was actually the perception. Staff and I think Carmela would agree because we've had multiple conversations in this, and it wasn't fair to other areas of the budget because we weren't saying that about level funding in other areas. So you can see where that seemed to have an adversary, you know, impact as we were developing various areas of the budget, whether we needed cuts in certain areas or not. So I think changing that word, it's definitely time to change the level word to something, you know, more appropriate.
All right. Somebody will come up with a good word for or just taking it out altogether, that level. All right. And number 3, creating the plan for maintenance of facilities and vehicles that includes a budget increase to provide, I want to add ventilation and air conditioning capacity in the schools. I don't know if that's part of our budget, but I do want to see us still focus on ventilation and air conditioning in all of our schools. Now, whether that's a CIP, you know, there was a point where we were talking about putting this in our budget because it was the ductless splits that we were talking about. So I don't know if this even belongs in here at this point. No. All right. So maybe that one will come out.
Would that just be the end of it? So it would stop at create a plan for maintenance of facilities and vehicles?
Well, I mean, we do create a, yeah.
That is part of the budget.
I was just gonna say, take out the whole number 3. But to be consistent with the technology, you know, the idea that technology and maintenance are often the areas that get cut when we're looking for places to reduce the budget, it makes sense to address both of those here, I guess, as areas that we want to maintain.
But I'm not sure just create a plan for maintenance of facilities and vehicles says anything. I don't think it adds any substance.
No.
I don't know, maybe we can combine that with whatever we come up with for number 2 so that it applies to both technology and facilities and maintenance, or whichever term we decide to use for that area of the budget.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? Yes, Ms. Huberty.
Hi, I'm still here. I know you have number 8 about continuing to pursue curriculum improvement and innovation. I'm just wondering, as a priority for next year, if somehow that shouldn't be strengthened to reflect the possible learning deficits that we may be uncovering as a result of all of the disruption to the educational process. Because that could be something, as you know, we haven't gotten traction to do assessments, and we're just beginning to get some idea of what those might be. And as the year goes on, we may find that there are some real needs that didn't exist before. So I just thought I would point that out. And then since you were talking about technology, I think you should keep in mind that we've put a lot of technology in place, and we will continue to do so. So we may be looking at technology in a different way next year in terms of reassessing where we are. And I know Dr. Rodriguez and I have talked a lot about what the implications will be of all the things that we've done moving forward. I just don't think anyone knows in terms of what the expectation will be for parents and flexibilities with student learning. And I think looking at our technology plan and what we have and where we have it, and how to ensure that buildings have equitable access and things like that, might be a little different than the way we've looked at it before, but just because we're putting a lot of technology in place. So those are just 2 thoughts I had that I wanted to share.
Yeah, those are good. I think well worth considering addressing here. The other one that I know that, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Delia, did you want to?
Maybe Anne, you can offer a suggestion for number 8, because that's one that I really think is of critical importance. So maybe over the next week or 2, you could possibly, if you wouldn't mind, offering something that we could.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So interestingly, I had number 8, and perhaps this needs to be addressed separately, but I had added to it. So it would read, continue to pursue curriculum improvement and innovation in order to ensure that equity and diversity are a focus and the educational needs of all students are supported. Just to reflect some of the things that we've been talking about, but maybe that the equity and diversity needs to be a separate piece, and that's what we were talking about. So I think to make this work, if everybody could send me your suggestions of what you would like added or taken away. I don't know, will that work? I will go back and listen to this part of the meeting and try to put together something based on, you know, everybody's input on these. That's what I'll do. I'll go back, listen to the meeting, put together something based on this conversation, send it out, and then if you all can insert your whatever you'd like to see added or subtracted from what I send out. And then I will assemble that, bring it to the next meeting. It'll go out before the next meeting in your packet, and we'll have the conversation at the next meeting. All right. Okay. So where does that bring us? We need to do the approval of the minutes of September 15th. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of September 15th.
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of September 15, 2020.
All right, Mr. D'Elia makes the motion and somebody will second.
Second.
Chairman Stites seconds the motion. Is there any discussion? All right, sensing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Mr. Cruson. So it passes with 4 in favor and Mr. Cruson abstaining. All right, and that brings us to our second public participation of the meeting. So I'll just ask that if anybody's on the phone and would like to address the board at this time, that you unmute yourself, or if you are muted, you can use *6 to unmute yourself, and just let us know who you are and your address, and try to keep your comments to under 3 minutes. Is there anybody who would like to address the board? All right, I am sensing none. So we'll close out public participation. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Mr. Cruson makes a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Harriman Stites seconds the motion. All those in favor? Aye. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Just know that you're still being recorded and streaming for a little bit here.